What is something your parents never let you do, that everyone else could? My parents never let me go to sleepovers. Not even once in my entire childhood. And it wasn't just a casual rule. It was this weird hill they were absolutely willing to die on. I grew up in a very average suburban neighborhood where sleepovers were basically the currency of kids' social life. Everyone always slept over at someone's house, for birthdays or just random weekends. But every time I was invited, it was always the same answer: you can go until 9 p.m., but then we'll come pick you up. My parents had this whole system where they would show up at any friend's house exactly at 9 p.m. sharp. No exceptions. I remember being at Rose's birthday party in 5th grade. My dad was literally standing in their living room while all the other girls were getting their sleeping bags ready. Rose's mom tried to convince him to let me stay, saying she would watch over us. But he just gave her this strange, tense smile and said, "Family policy," as if that explained everything. The worst part wasn't even leaving early from the parties. It was having to explain to everyone why I was leaving. The kids would say, "But why can't you stay?" And I never had a real answer. I made up things about having to feed our dog in the morning. We didn't have a dog. Or that I had early swim practice. I didn't swim. The shame was crushing, to be honest. I tried everything to change their minds. I begged. I cried. I made PowerPoint presentations about the benefits of peer social development. Yes, I was that kid, LOL. I even got my friends' parents to call mine and personally vouch for their supervision. Nothing worked. By middle school, the invitations started to dry up. Why bother inviting the kid who always had to leave? I would see my friends' Instagram stories of them all having breakfast together the next morning, and it just hurt. I started making excuses not to go to parties at all, because leaving early felt worse than not being there. My parents weren't even super strict about other things. I could watch PG-13 movies. I had a reasonable curfew for regular outings. They let me wear whatever I wanted. It was only with sleepovers that they were weird. When I was 16, I finally broke down during a massive fight about it. I was sobbing, asking why they were deliberately making me a social outcast. That was when my mom got very quiet. She sat down and told me that when she was 12, she had gone to a sleepover at a classmate's house. In that moment, my whole body seemed to freeze. The anger was still boiling inside me. After the fight, the yelling, all those years of feeling excluded, left out. But there was something different in her voice. She sounded distant, like she was talking to me but reliving a memory much older than anything I could imagine. It was a big house, one of those with wooden staircases, plush carpet in the hallway, and the smell of freshly baked cake. The girl's mom was cheerful. The dad was very nice, maybe too nice. My mom looked away and started fiddling with the seam of the cushion. I just sat there silently, still hurt, eyes still wet from crying, but listening. Because something told me this conversation was different from anything we'd ever had. There were about 7 girls. They played, watched movies, danced on the living room carpet. Then he came in with ice cream, a giant container of strawberry, already divided into plastic cups. She paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and let out a weak, joyless laugh. I didn't eat any because of my diabetes. My mom had made me promise not to eat anything she hadn't approved. I was dying to have some, but I obeyed. At that moment, I wasn't even breathing. The air felt heavy. I knew she was about to say something serious, something that could explain the years of rules that never made sense. A few minutes later, they started passing out one by one. At first, she thought they were just tired, but it was strange. They all fell asleep in less than 10 minutes, deeply. They didn't move. They didn't react. She clasped her hands in her lap. For the first time, I noticed they were trembling. He came back into the living room, saw her still awake, realized she hadn't eaten the ice cream. He looked surprised, nervous. He didn't say anything, but the way he looked at her made her feel ice cold inside. There was a long pause, a very long one. "I won't go into details," she said, "because I don't want to hurt you or put that image in your head. But that night, that man stole the innocence of girls who only wanted to play and sleep together, who trusted him. I saw everything. I heard things no child should hear. And I had to run. Hide. Scream. Until I managed to call my mother from a landline. My mouth was dry, my heart was beating so hard it seemed to echo through the couch. The police came, they took him away, and the matter died there. I never spoke about it with anyone. Not with your grandmother. Not even with myself, for years. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were full of water, but she wasn't crying. It was as if she had learned to swallow tears for so long that they no longer came out. So yes, I was the mother who never let you sleep over. I was the annoying one, the dramatic one, the one who ruined everything. But I would rather have been that than risk going through it again, or seeing you go through it. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't. It was as if everything inside me was in conflict. Part of me understood. And another part hurt even more, as if that story explained everything but healed nothing. As if even knowing the why, I had still grown up carrying the weight of loneliness. And there, in that silent living room, between old truths and new wounds, something changed between us. Only, I still didn't know whether it was the beginning of a reconciliation or an even greater distance. In truth, I don't even know how long we sat in silence after she finished speaking. Minutes? Hours? The wall clock was ticking irritably, as if it were timing my discomfort. My mother just sat there, motionless, staring at the cushion in her lap as if it were the only safe place in the world. And I was in shock. Suddenly, all those memories of our fights came flooding back like an avalanche. The doors I had slammed, the poisonous words I had shouted, the times I had called her controlling, neurotic, old-fashioned. That time when I looked her in the eyes and told her I hated being her daughter. My stomach twisted. My face flushed, but not with anger, with shame. My throat closed up. For years, I had carried this pain as if it were the greatest suffering in the world, growing up without sleepovers, without staying at friends' houses, without being part of the chosen group. But what she had carried, that didn't even have a name. It was a pain she had kept silent, as if she had buried it inside her chest and poured cement over it. She had been trying to protect me, not out of control, not out of distrust, but because at some point in her life, she had seen the darkest side of people and survived it. I'm sorry. The words came out low, more like a whisper than speech. My mother didn't react immediately. She just took a deep breath, like someone who has heard apologies before but isn't sure if they should accept them. I'm so sorry, Mom, my voice faltered. I never imagined, never. My eyes filled with tears, but now it wasn't frustration. It was remorse, the kind that feels like it's biting you from the inside. I blamed you so much. I said so many horrible things. I made you feel like you were the villain of my life, when really you were only trying to make sure that story didn't repeat itself with me. She lifted her eyes, looked at me, and in them I saw the 12-year-old girl who was never the same again. You were right all along, I continued, trying to keep my voice steady, but failing miserably. And I only saw my side, my pain. I never thought about where yours came from. I never wanted to know. The tears ran down my face as if they were washing away everything that had been trapped for years. The wounds of exclusion, of lonely teenage years, of parties I never attended, they were all there. But now they all seemed so small compared to what my mother had carried. I'm sorry for making you feel like you were a bad mother. You were the best mother you could be, with the burden you had. And I should have trusted you more. Finally, she smiled. A small, sad, but genuine smile. You couldn't have known, she said in a calm tone. And I made mistakes too, by not telling you sooner. Maybe if I had shared this with you, everything would have been different. But I couldn't. For many years, I couldn't even remember. We stayed there, face to face. 2 generations marked by different pains, hers by the tragedy that almost happened, mine by a life built on a misunderstanding. The most absurd thing is that at that moment, I felt so much love for her that it hurt, a sad love, full of regret but also gratitude. She had protected me with all the strength she had, even if it meant becoming the witch of my childhood. And maybe that's the purest kind of love there is. But even though the atmosphere between us had begun to change, there was still much to say, wounds too open to heal with a single apology. And I still had no idea how this conversation would impact the days to come. I sat there next to her for a time I couldn't measure, in silence. Occasionally, we exchanged glances, but neither of us forced any words. It was as if we were relearning how to breathe in front of each other. And honestly, I didn't know what hurt more, her past or my own regret for having turned her into a monster in my head for so many years. That night, I decided to sleep at home. I had been avoiding it for months. Since I turned 18, I would sleep at my boyfriend's place or stay out late just to avoid facing the silent looks at breakfast. But now it was different. Now, I wanted to stay because I didn't want to leave her alone with those ghosts again. The next morning, I woke up early. The smell of café con leche in the kitchen reminded me of childhood, when I would sit on the counter complaining about my school uniform while she sliced bread and spread margarine. That morning, it was she who was sitting there, with a cup in her hands, looking out the window as if waiting for some answer from the world. "Good morning," I murmured. She smiled. "Did you sleep well?" "I did. And you?" "Not so much," she shrugged, "but it's not your fault." I sat next to her. "Mom, I wanted to ask you something. If you don't want to answer, I understand. But, after that night, did you get help? Did you go to therapy? Did you talk to someone?" She took a deep breath and set the cup on the table. She didn't answer right away, staring ahead. Back then, that was even more taboo than it is today. No one talked about trauma, about abuse, about mental health. My mother didn't want anyone to know what had happened. She said the shame would fall on our family, as if it were my fault. The police recorded the case. He was arrested, but there was never a trial. The evidence disappeared. Everything was covered up. His daughter was transferred to another school. And I was instructed to forget. I swallowed hard. It was worse than I had imagined. "And, did you manage to do it?" She turned her face and looked at me with tired eyes. "I didn't just learn not to talk about it. That hit me in a way I can't even explain. I had grown up seeing my mother as someone strong, steady, always in control. And there she was, revealing that she was a survivor who never had the right to heal. "You deserve more," I said in a choked voice. "You deserve to be heard, supported, protected, not silenced." She gave a bitter smile. "Maybe. But back then, I just wanted to pretend it had never happened. And after you were born, all I wanted was to make sure you never had to pretend about anything. That you would never go through what I went through." I couldn't take it. I got up, went to her, and hugged her. This time, she didn't resist. She hugged me back, tightly, as if she had been saving that gesture since my childhood. We stayed like that for long seconds. And I felt the weight of her past on my shoulders. She wasn't a cold woman. She was a woman with fear. And deep down, maybe I had inherited that fear too, just under a different name. "You were a good mother," I whispered, unable to hold back my tears, even with everything. She stroked my hair as she used to when I was little. "I tried. I swear I tried. I just didn't know how to explain it without breaking you too." In that moment, I understood that my pain was never greater than hers, just different. And maybe, after so much time, we were ready to heal together. But what I didn't know was that this hug would be the first step to unearthing something even deeper, something she had never had the courage to tell anyone. And when it came to light, it would change everything again. A few weeks passed after that conversation. Things between my mother and me changed. We didn't become best friends overnight, but there was now a new kind of silence between us, a silence of respect, as if the anger that had once separated us had been pushed aside to make room for something more sincere. I still lived far away, but now I visited more often. Sometimes we would just sit and have tea and talk about nothing. Other times, we would sit in silence, sharing the same space like two people who no longer needed to prove anything to each other. It was strange and comforting at the same time. Until, one ordinary afternoon, everything changed again. And this time, it wasn't because of something she said. It was because of the television. It was a quiet Saturday. We were in the kitchen cutting fruit and talking about a children's birthday party that my cousin was going to organize. The TV was on low volume, on the news channel. We weren't really paying attention, until one sentence made my heart stop for a second. 16-year-old under investigation for putting substances in drinks at a sleepover, causing several girls to fall into a deep sleep immediately. My mother dropped the knife onto the cutting board. I froze. Both of us remained motionless, listening in silence. The case had happened in the young man's own family home. The party had been organized by his younger sister, and the guests, all friends from school, began showing signs of drowsiness shortly after consuming juices and desserts offered by him. My throat went dry. My mother placed her hands on her chest. She wasn't crying, but her gaze was very distant. Fortunately, one of the mothers arrived earlier than the agreed time and noticed that something was wrong. The girls were taken to the hospital as a precaution, and they are fine. The young man was referred to the authorities. "Turn it off," my mother said, almost in a whisper. I turned it off. She moved away from the sink and sat down on the chair with a vacant look. "It wasn't the father," she murmured. "It was the brother. A boy. Just an ordinary boy." The silence in the kitchen was too heavy. I sat near her. There wasn't much to say, because the similarity with her past was obvious. The same scenario repeated, a safe home, a trusting environment, an innocent party, and suddenly something happens behind a smile. I took a deep breath. It was as if the past had put on a new face. And what scared me the most was how possible it all seemed, how danger sometimes hides in the places we least expect. That night, I didn't sleep well. The image from the news stayed in my head like a movie that wouldn't stop replaying. Girls in pajamas, mattresses laid out, colorful lights, and one detail out of place, enough to turn the world upside down. I began to truly understand the weight my mother had carried. She didn't forbid sleepovers out of exaggeration. She did it because she knew. Because she had seen with her own eyes how everything can change in a matter of minutes. And the cruelest part of all, even with everything we have today, cameras, cell phones, social media, these situations still happen. They still happen to children, to ordinary families, to people who have no idea what is about to happen. Before I left that night, I hugged my mother again, not because she needed it, but because I needed it. I needed to thank her for being tough, for protecting me, and especially for facing so many ghosts alone just to make sure none of them would ever reach me. But I was wrong to think that I already knew everything. Days later, I found something in her room that showed me there was much more to the story than she had told me. And this discovery would change everything again. I thought I had finally understood, after the conversation, the hug, the news on TV, I thought I had finally grasped the reason behind it all. I thought I knew enough. But no. Not until that day. I returned to my mother's house on a rainy afternoon. She was in the bedroom, reorganizing old drawers in the dresser, when she called me to help her. She said she wanted to get rid of old things. But deep down, it seemed like she was struggling against the urge to forget once and for all, or maybe trying to organize her pain with her own hands. Among boxes of yellowed photos and some folded letters, we found a red-covered notebook, very, very worn. She held it for a second, hesitated, and then handed it to me. "You can read it," she said softly. It was a diary dated from the same year when everything happened. The first pages talked about school, friends, exams, new clothes. But then her handwriting changed. It became smaller, heavier, shaky. Today Julia's mother called me, ungrateful, because I didn't want to tell what happened. She said I should stop making things up. I could only cry. The school didn't want to get involved. They said it wasn't their responsibility. They gave me a medical certificate for a few days. The principal didn't even look me in the eye. I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see their living room, the smell of the ice cream, the strange silence when everyone started to fall asleep. I feel trapped in this nightmare. I sat there on the floor, the diary on my lap, my hands cold. It was as if every word was stitching together the background of the woman I had known my entire life but never truly understood. She wasn't exaggerating. She wasn't rigid out of whim. She was trying, with all her strength, to prevent a tragedy from repeating itself. And in that instant, something changed inside me. I felt an indignation I had never felt before, not toward her, but toward the way the world treats certain things so casually. Toward this foolish, outdated, and so dangerously innocent idea that sleepovers are synonymous with a happy childhood. Toward the way that even today, this is seen as something obligatory for children's socialization. Toward the number of parents who still let their children sleep over without even knowing who else is in that house. "It's absurd that this still exists," I whispered. My mother looked at me, surprised. "What do you mean?" "These parties. This idea that everyone needs to sleep over to be a real kid. This is a ready-made trap and no one realizes it. No one wants to realize it." She stayed quiet. I think she hadn't expected to hear that from me. "How many other girls went through what you went through and stayed silent?" I continued. "How many other normal kids in normal homes do hidden things and destroy lives in silence?" The truth hit me hard. The anger I had felt before, for not having lived certain experiences, now transformed into a different anger, for having lived without knowing how much my mother had fought to keep me safe. She didn't give me sleepovers. She gave me safety. And no one had ever valued that. I carefully closed the diary and hugged it to my chest. I understand now, Mom. Truly. Not just for you, for myself too. She smiled, a tired smile but full of relief, as if after so many years she could finally rest a little. In that moment, I decided, if I ever have a daughter, she won't sleep over at anyone's house. Not out of paranoia, but because now I know what my mother always knew. And only those who truly see the danger have the courage to say no when everyone else says yes. If I had to sum up everything I've lived through these past few months, maybe I would just say this: my mother saved me, even when I thought she was punishing me. I grew up believing she had deprived me of the best parts of childhood. I thought her no was personal, that she didn't trust me, that she wanted to isolate me, make me strange, weird, lonely. And in reality, she just didn't want what had happened to her to happen again, not to me, not to anyone. After reading that diary, I spent days revisiting my entire childhood through the new lens I now had. I remembered the parties that ended early, the pitying looks from friends, the awkward questions I never knew how to answer. And for the first time, I didn't feel ashamed. No, I felt proud. Proud of the girl who endured exclusion without knowing she was being protected by an invisible shield. Proud of the mother who carried an immense trauma in silence so that I wouldn't carry any. We never spoke about the diary again. She knew I had read it all, and I knew she preferred not to relive every detail. But something between us solidified after that. It was as if an old, finally true bond had been stitched between our wounds. One Sunday afternoon, while we were walking in the park, she said something that took me by surprise. "You would have been a good friend for me, if we had been the same age." I looked at her and smiled. You would have been a good friend for me too. Maybe even the only one. And it was true. Gradually, I started talking about this with other women, college classmates, cousins, even some mothers I knew. And I discovered that more people than I had imagined had similar stories. Some didn't talk about them. Others had forgotten, or preferred to believe they had forgotten. But what scared me most was seeing that sleepovers continued to be seen as normal, innocent, obligatory. One of them even commented, "Oh, that's your mom's trauma. You can't raise kids with fear." And I wanted to respond with the diary in my hands. I wanted to show all the times when fear had been what prevented something worse. But I just took a deep breath. Because now I knew that my story wasn't to convince anyone. It was to keep me grounded. To protect what I knew was worth protecting. Today, looking back on everything I've lived through, I know my mother wasn't perfect. She made mistakes, in keeping so much inside, in staying silent, in excluding me without explaining. But she got it right where it mattered most. She kept me whole. And that, as painful as it is to say, is worth more than any silly childhood memory. If I ever have a daughter or a son, they will know everything. They will grow up with confidence, but with awareness. They will know they have the right to say no, even when everyone else says yes. And more importantly, they will know that the greatest dangers rarely wear scary masks. Sometimes they are behind a glass of juice, an innocent invitation, an older brother who smiles too much. The world will continue to call it exaggeration, drama, a story that's not really like that. But my mother taught me something no school would ever teach. Being a mother is sometimes carrying a trauma that no one sees, just to make sure your child never has to carry any. And now that I know this, I know my childhood wasn't smaller. It was safer. It was more protected. It was freer than I had ever imagined. And for that, every time I see someone preparing a sleepover, I take a deep breath, lower my eyes, and give silent thanks, for having had a mother who didn't let me go. Because she had already gone, and came back marked, so that I would never need to be wounded too.